Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for registering for today's webinar, International Women's Day 2022, hashtag Break the Bias. My name is Michael Hurl, and I am a member of the Compliance Institute Executive. Just a couple of points before we begin. A recording of this webinar, the CPD code, will be made available after this session has concluded. If you would like to pose a question to today's speakers, please do so through the question section on the right-hand side of your screen. I will now hand over to today's moderator, the President of Compliance Institute, Mr. Diarmuid White.
Thank you, Michael. Welcome everybody to our Compliance Institute International Women's Day 2022 event, where we all as a global community are seeking to break the bias. Today we bring together our global panel of 4 spectacular champions of inclusiveness. They use their superpowers to advance these values. You may be asking what we mean by champion of inclusiveness. Champions are advancing various areas of diversity and inclusiveness within their businesses. Our champions here today recognize human values, the power of individual talent, and that it takes into account new societal challenges. When prioritizing what to amplify or change, everyone's input is equally as important. Inclusiveness on the ground involves activities such as ensuring that all employees of a company have access to all services and positions, regardless of age, gender, origin, sexual orientation, or health status. All profiles should be able to integrate into our companies. Inclusion is a transformation of society aimed at overcoming all accessibility barriers in traditional structures. An inclusive company is one in which inclusion is embedded into its culture and the way in which it operates. Being inclusive is also a sign of leadership and a company's maturity. Recognizing, accepting, and valuing difference enables companies to achieve better performance. According to the consultancy firm Deloitte, companies that practice an inclusive policy generate up to 30% more turnover per employee and higher profitability than their competitors. An organization's role is to involve and value individuals who are different in terms of their background, including the origin, gender, sexual orientation, religion, physical and/or mental conditions in the same working environment. They must recognize and ensure that the uniqueness of each individual is recognized, respected, and make this diversity a strength. The main challenge of inclusion is to fight against discrimination in the job search and the workplace. The Compliance Institute recognizes these challenges and is currently working to establish its own diversity and inclusion committee. And we do expect to read out to our membership base in the near future, looking for those to champion that inclusion. Enough of the initial intro. I'm going to now just give a brief overview of each and introduce each of our panelists today. We have Virginia Otel. Virginia joins us live from Bucharest as a senior executive with more than 25 years experience in the financial services sector in Romania and has experience in general management, business development, marketing and human resource. Virginia's wealth of experience and championing of gender balanced leadership programs have led her to multiple Forbes Awards, national coverage, and secured her prestigious positions of change across national and global boards. This includes the PWN Global and the largest existing professional community advancing gender equity, where Virginia is currently co-president. We have Pamela Kavanagh. Pamela joins us from Special Olympics Ireland, where she leads the marketing and communications role. She's recently been breaking the norms in raising visibility and a broader approach to profiling their athletes and diversity champions. Pamela comes with lengthy experience across both the private and non-profit sector. We're also joined by Heather Sinclair, entrepreneur, corporate coach, and founder of Coevolution. Heather joins us from Canada today. Heather's focus is culture by design, and she has a proprietary culture tune-up program developed on values-based leadership and incorporating the culture transformational tool created by Richard Barrett. Finally, we have Fiona Flynn, founder Montauk Consulting, PWN Dublin president. Fiona has significant experience as a leader in building and developing commercial teams to deliver results and growth in market share in a highly competitive and fast-paced environment. As a facilitator, Fiona's coaching style is ability to connect people at a human emotional level, enabling them to develop their awareness and understanding of behaviors together with emotions and belief that drive them. So that's the brief intro on the panelists. We'll now open the session with a question to our entire panel. What does it mean to you to champion inclusion? And what challenges have you had to face in your experience advancing inclusiveness?
Hello, everybody. If I could start.
Yes, Virginia, certainly.
I'm honored to be your invitee today and to be a member of the distinguished panel. And thank you once again for the invitation. I would like to share with you two stories. One of my personal experience as a mother, and then another one with my volunteer hat that I have been having for the last 10 years with Professional Women's Network. As a mother, I'm talking about inclusion, and I think it's also a matter of mindset. And I also believe that we as mothers and fathers need to educate our children. And I remember that when my son was even in the primary school, he came home and he said, "Oh, but we have a new colleague in our classroom, and he has a great handicap, and people didn't welcome him accordingly." They said, "Oh, Migna, but this is not the right term to use. You know, everybody may have some health issues, and we need to be empathetic. And what would happen if you were in his shoes and you would have a mental or physical health problem?" So what I want to transmit is that we as individuals, as parents, need to educate first our children, because if this is happening from an early stage, then it will be natural their future development as persons when they become adults, and such issues of diversity and inclusion may be well mitigated. Second, my story about my volunteering activity within Professional Women's Network. I have been a member of the local chapter in Romania since it was launched more than 10 years ago. And later on, in 2014, I was elected Vice President Women on Boards. And at that point in time, I was talking with some colleagues from our Brussels chapter. And we were talking about how can we have more women on boards, either in executive management positions or on the sitting on the boards of directors. And we actually realized that we need to further encourage women to do that, because according to some research, women, when they have to apply for various positions, they need to be more than 100% confident of their knowledge and competencies when they apply for that position. Whereas men are more courageous. Again, research has shown that if they know about 60–70%, they apply and they take the risk of the gap. So we said, okay, let's do something in this respect in order to boost the self-confidence of women in order to apply for such board positions. And I said, okay, let's do something in this respect. Let's organize a learning program for the women who want to become members of the board of directors. And we established Women on Boards Academy that actually became a successful program within our own network. And we are now at the third edition, and we have more than 100 women that have attended our Women on Boards Academy. So I will leave my colleagues to talk about their professional experience, but I just wanted to share with you my personal experience as a parent. And I would like to focus this emphasis on educating our children from early ages up to volunteering for gender balanced leadership causes. Thank you.
Thank you, Virginia. We might go to Pamela next, if that's okay.
Yeah, no problem. Hi, everybody. Thanks for taking your lunch time out to attend today. It's a great honor to be here as well, so thanks a million. Yeah, I suppose some of those points that Virginia touched on really resonate with myself, working for Special Olympics Ireland for the last 8 years. I feel like as an organisation, we have the jump on everybody because we've been operating in the inclusion and diversity space. In Ireland, the organisation has been for the last 40 years, and internationally, having been set up by the Shrivers in the States for the last 50 years. So yeah, look, we've been flying the flag for diversity and inclusion, not only across females, but obviously across people with an intellectual disability in particular. And I suppose for me, just to the way that we would champion inclusion in our everyday roles, I suppose, is really to not only to always advocate on behalf of those who maybe are not able to advocate on behalf of themselves, but also to look for opportunities to empower them to advocate on behalf of themselves. So, I mean, the same across females as well, is to look for opportunities to, you know, raise them up, look around your organisation, look around your daily roles and speak up, and as I said, kind of really lift others up as well, to give them those opportunities to shine and speak on their own behalf. And again, like we're always looking at diversity in a room, or before we start any sort of campaign, is to really seek out those different voices to make sure that you really are representing your audience. Yeah, with that. So yeah.
Thank you, Pamela. Might go to Heather next then. Heather, from your experiences of champion inclusiveness.
Yes, thank you. So and thank you, Pamela and Virginia. And Virginia, I'm laughing because while we never spoke or planned about this ahead of time, I too believe that I have come to my championing of inclusiveness as a result of the values that I was raised with as a child and in my family. And also the school that I went to had a program for Down syndrome and physically disabled kids that were integrated into my phys ed programs, into the football team, into the classrooms. So that broke down barriers, albeit it was a very white school. It didn't have to be that way, because I could have been taught different behaviors and beliefs. And my stories that I would share are that I was so fortunate in my first job experience where inclusivity was the ground level starting page. Everyone from the receptionist all the way to the chairman of the company were involved in planning and team meetings. There was a respect that went around the table. There were individuals of color that worked there that were also included in creative and brainstorming. So that fed into me, and in how I live that in my life, where I work or in previous jobs. I'll give one example with two examples actually. One is with after George Floyd and the initiative in Canada with BlackNorth.ca to champion the rights and inclusion of people of color, particularly Black individuals. I was invited as a result of my work, having launched the Toronto Raptors and the NBA in Canada. I had a relationship with high-profile NBA players, Isaiah Thomas, for example. I'm invited onto a committee to help determine the sport and entertainment section of this organization. I was there and I put forward my colleague who's Black, who specializes in decolonizing sport in Canada and North America. And as a result of that, he is on the committee now and has been networked into. He said, I would never have this network. I would never have had the opportunity to do this. So I see that as part of what I do in terms of speaking for those who are not at the table and creating that connection because of my position of privilege. And the challenges, I would say, the challenges are having friends and colleagues that I work with who, through no fault of their own perhaps, don't have friends, don't champion women, don't have friends that are people of color. They just have never had that in their life. So it's working and helping to have those conversations and having the courage to have the conversation.
Thank you, Heather. I'll now go to Fiona.
Good afternoon, everyone, and as Pamela said, thanks again for giving up your lunch. Just thinking through in terms of my own, I was raised as the eldest of 4 with 3 brothers, so I think from an early age, I probably, I was the odd one out, and you felt that a little bit different, but it didn't deter me, and through my career, and in fact, in some of my earlier career, which was obviously quite a number of years ago, I would have been the only female on a management team, and at the time was very proud of that, and was very lucky to work in a culture, to work in a climate, in a very fast-paced company. But it didn't matter that I was the only female, that my voice was heard, my opinion mattered, I was able to speak up, and I think that really has resonated through my entire career, and informing my, a leadership company now, and I'm very passionate of working with leaders that if they can create what we call a thriving climate, using their emotional intelligence, being aware that having a diverse team is good for business as well as the right thing to do, and to ensure that everyone is included, you actually can untap some phenomenal talent. And a story that even now in 2022 is still quite shocked me in terms of a challenge. Like I also work with organizations to support their diverse talent, to do inclusive leadership programs, to support female talent, to support working parents. And to hear a story the back end of last year where a participant on a program could remember a time in the organization where as a female, they were effectively told not to speak in a meeting, that proactively told not to open or say anything in a meeting, to this organization now coming a full 360, and actively encouraging that, not just through training and development, but from the leadership right down, and that the narrative is very much that every voice is heard, not just obviously male, female, but through all aspects. And I think for me, the single biggest thing, I'm bringing that into the work as a volunteer with PWN Dublin, is how we can support diverse talent to ensure their voice is heard, their opinion matters, and linking it with the theme of today and breaking the bias. One thing I'm probably quite passionate about, that it's not one day a year, that it's every day, and that it's on a, every single day, what are we doing to ensure that everyone in the room, their voice matters, their opinion matters. We do create a space to speak up, but that is a feeling, it is a feeling, and creating that climate is the important thing to do.
Just taking a team, and again, and this isn't very scripted, right? But through all of your updates there, you reference the fact and the importance of advocacy and parties that will push the change. What are the kind of behaviors that you would expect individuals to see to do that? Is it just the speaking up piece and representing and facilitating those views to be shared? And we might go to Heather if that's okay, or if that works.
Yes, sorry, no, I just had to. Yeah, I agree. It is for the people who have the ability to speak up, who perhaps have either trained or had role models. As Fiona said, I also came up in a work environment where I had very strong female leaders, so I was encouraged to speak up, and we were more of the leadership team than the men, so there was a lot. And it is making the effort as a leader to invite those conversations for people that are introverts, or in leading teams, a software developer who sits alone coding in a dark room at night is going to have a different way of showing up at work compared to a sales executive. And as a leader, it's up to us to help people learn those different skills and to respect and learn how different people are and behave, and that's okay. And we don't all have to be the same. So it's giving the space and creating the environment for people to feel safe. Easier said than done, but can be done.
Thank you, Heather. Appreciate that. I've got a question here then for Fiona. In your experience across various sectors of the industry, do you feel emotional intelligence has an important role to play? And can you develop that as part of the Champion of Inclusiveness?
Absolutely. So a lot of people think that emotional intelligence, you either have it or haven't. It actually can be developed, and there's a lot of tools, there's coaching, there's many different things you can do that. And I think I would always feel that when somebody is very emotionally intelligent, that we don't need to worry about inclusiveness because they're naturally inclusive. So effectively they're aware how they show up, how their behavior impacts others. To Heather's point, that they have an awareness of how other people, what they may need. So some people need that maybe quiet arm around the shoulder to nurture them. Others need more of an open space. But I would feel it's very important that that we have a high level of confidence and regard in ourselves and also in others. So we see others as equal. We may not like their opinions, we mightn't like their beliefs, but we respect them and we listen to them. And actively encouraging that in a business, I think, is really important, that really proactively look for diverse opinions and thoughts, and allowing those healthy conversations, and that really helps build that trust, and people then feel that it's okay to be able to speak up and say things.
So you've touched on obviously the skills that are needed around emotional intelligence. How can a professional develop that? Is it about forming new habits? What is it that can be done in terms of honing those skills and developing them further?
Yeah, probably the single biggest thing is to build and develop your self-awareness. So to effectively, our emotional intelligence, how effectively we manage our personality. Are we thinking? Are we monitoring our thinking and feeling? So being aware of our inner voice, reading situations in a room, even understanding yourself. What are the triggers that might get you using negative behaviors? How your behaviors impact others. So developing your self-awareness on a daily basis. How am I feeling going into this meeting? Am I picking up on some of the signals and the body language from people in the room? And creating a very open environment for feedback, within your team can be a hard place to go, asking for feedback, but actually nurturing a positive feedback culture. How am I showing up? How did you feel after that meeting? And constantly, feedback on behavior. So not taking it personally, but getting a deeper understanding of how our behaviors are landing with other people. For example, how are mistakes dealt with? I work with some clients and they're like, oh, we want this to be a learning culture. We want, risks. But the minute there's a mistake happens, it becomes very much blaming. So people are like, oh, well, I'm not going to go there again. So, it's just being aware of what it is we nurture, but definitely building your self-awareness and being able to take and receive feedback in a very positive, constructive way goes a long way.
Thank you, Fiona. I think that's very insightful. I might go to Virginia next. You've obviously won multiple global business awards and have been very vocal in mainstream media about the need for women to be included and welcome to executive boards. What do you see as the biggest advantages for society and business to increase the female representation? And secondly, where should leaders and policymakers start and continue the work there?
Yeah, I've been preoccupied by this topic for a long time, and actually, I have read many researches in this area, and I understand that clearly there are economic advantages of gender diversity on company boards, and allow me to share with you at least some of them. First, improved company performance, and various studies suggest that companies with a higher share of women at top levels deliver strong organizational and financial performance. And also, studies have shown that where governance is weak, female directors can exercise strong oversight and have a positive value, a relevant impact on the company. So a gender balanced board is more likely to pay attention to managing and controlling risk. And this is very important. McKinsey, I remember, made a study a few years ago when we talk about company performance, and they measured such financial performance in companies from the same industry, companies that had women on board, and companies that didn't have women on board. And the result was that EBITDA, one of the most, let's say, interesting financial ratios, was almost 20% higher in companies that had women on board. So it's like what erat demonstrandum, you know, in terms of company financial performance. Another argument is related to mirroring the market, because according to the last estimates made by the international organizations, women control more than 70% of the global consumer spending decisions. So, if we have more women in executive management positions or sitting on the boards of directors of the respective companies, such participation can therefore provide a broader insight in economic behavior and consumer choices. So products and services that are more in line with consumer needs and preferences can boost sales figures. Thirdly, I think that more women and having a higher degree of gender diversity on company boards can support a better quality of decision making, because diversity among employees and board members boosts creativity and innovation, and by adding complementary knowledge, skills, and experience. And the more diverse board of directors can contribute to better performance, because decisions are based on evaluating more alternatives compared to homogeneous boards. And if we are talking about group thinking in such management or board of directors, definitely such group thinking is diminished. The fourth argument is related to improved company or corporate governance and ethics. And since we are talking about compliance, I think this is also a very valuable argument, because studies again have shown that the quality of corporate governance and ethical behavior is high in companies with a higher share of women on boards. Last but not the least, it's about the better use of the talent pool. 60% of graduates in Europe are women. And on one hand, we are talking about skill shortages and aging population, but we cannot longer afford to underutilize female talent. So if half of the talent pool is not even considered for leadership positions, the quality of appointments may be compromised. So systematically including suitable candidates of both genders ensures that new board members are selected from the very best candidates, both males and females. And all of these actually provide a higher reputation for the respective corporations. And even nowadays, when we are talking about environmental, social, and governance criteria. It is extremely important to have these considerations in mind. If I refer to your second question about leaders, how can business leaders and policymakers, if I recall correctly, can have an impact, I think that it would be a top-down approach, because business leaders should become maybe the ambassadors of diversity and inclusion in their own in the companies that they lead on one hand, and gender balanced leadership policies can be developed without any efforts, I would say. But on the other hand, also it could be a bottom-up approach, and in this respect, I may also recommend one program that PWN Global will be launching soon. It is about gender balanced leadership incubator, where people from various businesses together and they talk among themselves and they find the solutions how to increase gender balance in their respective businesses.
Yeah.
In terms of policy, yeah.
I was just going to say, you've touched on some key points around the culture-based approach from the top down, bottom up, and I think that neatly kind of brings me over to kind of Heather, maybe to put a question to you, Heather. Culture is obviously instrumental in the success, growth of employee engagement at all levels, and it makes sense to spend the time and invest in getting it right. Can you talk to us a little bit about your experience and how culture plays a positive role, I suppose, in shifting the diversity needle?
Sure. Yes. Thank you. Thank you for that question. Thank you, Virginia. I've actually got a very practical and tangible example to what you spoke about in terms of bringing gender equality, and which I'll get to in a minute. But first, I want to start with a definition of culture so that we get on a bit of a level playing field. And there's lots of them out there. And culture is represented by the beliefs, behaviors, and values of any group. So it could be your family, it could be a team, it could be the board, it could be the leadership team, could be the whole company. And it is also inclusive of those legacy values, behaviors, and beliefs from prior CEOs and the leadership team. And those are embedded in the system of the organization. So your processes, your policies, your incentive structures. So it's very important that there's a holistic approach. You're looking at the values and behaviors of individuals, and you're looking at how they are showing up in systems, either based on fear or positive. So having said that, I think there are, three, in my experience, there's two different kinds of streams. There's one where it's a longer lead time to get a CEO and a leadership team and the board perhaps on board to do if it's a really deep dive into the culture change. And sometimes that can be very scary and take a long time to get people on board, and they don't know where to start. And I think that's one of the first things I hit is, how do we even start? And so that's why one of the approaches that I dealt, because I deal more small to mid-sized organizations, was to create what I call is a tune-up. So it's really, how do you get your foot in the door to understanding where your culture is at, to make the commitment to wanting to change your culture, and to do it in a quote safe way that you feel you can make some progress on. So I firmly believe you've got to make the commitment, and commitment shows up in how you then live and embody it within your organization and systems and performance agreements and all that kind of stuff. But you first got to make the commitment. That's the toughest part, because people get scared away. They don't know how to start. They don't know what language to use. They're afraid. The second part is to measure your culture. You can measure it very quickly and effectively, and do it online, and get a real snapshot of what are the values that individuals, your staff, your CEO, or your board have. What are the values that you want your culture to live and be? And what's the gap between the two? So if you think of it like an iceberg sometimes, where you know, what you say you're going to do and how you're going to behave is above the water, and 2/3 of how you actually do it, the workarounds, the sidebar meetings, the meeting before the meeting, the information silos, the lack of accountability, all of that kind of stuff is actually the how of your, what's showing up in your culture. So commit, measure, and then within that, build a roadmap. Figure out the top 2 to 3 things that are going to give you the highest return immediately, so that you can build some confidence in terms of change. And some examples, and then repeat. So recommit to the culture. You've got to make it a part of your daily behavior. You've got to measure it. It fundamentally has to be a part of your business strategy, because it is what is going to deliver on your business strategy. And a specific example, Virginia, going back to what you mentioned about bringing in, I work for an organization, a provincial sport body. It's 100 years old this year. Last year was the first time they ever had a female board chair. That female board chair has been championing inclusivity, diversity, equity. It is mandated from a board level. The CEO was always committed to it, but the CEO could not get the other board members aligned around it, and needed this fundamental support from this new visionary, happened to be a female, who brought in different skills and different lenses to the process. So they now are actioning that within their strategic planning processes. And a second example of you know, how it gets embedded and living within the history of organizations and institutions is work that I did with a large cultural institution, where the new CEO that brought me on knew there was a certain level of dysfunction in the leadership team, couldn't quite put a finger on it, and their toxicity level was like one step away from completely re-engaging a whole new leadership team. And that's one of the things that leaders have to have, is the courage to make hard change. If someone doesn't have the emotional maturity to recognize that their behaviors need to change, you have to have the courage to make that change. Give them a window of time to be a part of the new evolution. And so in this particular instance, one of the things that we work on, and going back to Fiona about tangible steps, right? It seems really simple, but it's so effective in terms of something. One of the things, just as an example, was trust was something that was really dysfunctional. And so we do a keep, stop, start program. So define what trust is. And I've got it for this particular team. It was a feeling of safety and reliance, that we have each other's back. And then what does it look like? So how does it feel? What are the behaviors? What does it look like in action? It's a belief in the competency of my colleagues, honesty, teamwork, trusting your teammates, not second guessing everyone, not talking over each other, listening, and an energy of lightness in the room. And so the beauty of this, and to go back to the importance of, Virginia, as you said, of let them define, the team has to define it for themselves, what trust means, what accountability means, because it's going to be different for every organization. And then what is it not? Stressful, heavy, information hoarding, making assumptions, backstabbing, meeting after meeting, throwing colleagues under the bus, coming in with an agenda to a meeting. So we've all been there. We've all seen this kind of stuff. And at the end of the day, the impact that this team wanted to see, they wanted to feel good coming to work. They wanted to be the change that they all knew they wanted. It was like we popped the air out of the balloon in terms of their evolving their culture. So those are some tangible, practical things that people can do. So I hope that was helpful, and I'm conscious of the time.
That was very insightful, Heather. I really appreciate it. And I think that you touched on safety there, and it leads me on to a question I want to put to Pamela. Pamela, in your role, you've been involved in developing strong, impactful campaigns to highlight diverse ambassadors in sport. And linking to the safety point, a sense of belonging for everybody is different in terms of how they can feel safe to share views and partake, and to avoid the points I think that Heather's outlined. Can you share what it's been like for you to work on some of those projects and campaigns, and the impact that it has on the kind of society?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and I mean, I suppose it is actually all relative, and we're coming back to very similar strands and points in that. Yeah, I suppose working, like I'm in a really privileged position because I get inspired by the people I work with on a daily basis. Barriers are put in front of them on a daily basis as such, you know, so, and they're constantly breaking down those biases against that they come across. And yeah, and operating in the sport sector as well, which is a male dominated sector too. And I mean, you can see how it all kind of can stack up against you. I mean, I suppose we're lucky in Ireland and worldwide, we do have amazing female ambassadors. And again, you know, I suppose my role in Special Olympics is to put our athletes out there as ambassadors, because back in actually 2018, the Federation of Irish Sport and Sport Ireland came out with a great campaign, and it was called 20 by 20, and they had a very simple goal of increasing the awareness of female sports participation by 20% by the year 2020. Now they achieved that, and the work has continued while that particular campaign has been put to bed. But I mean, their tagline was simple as well. It was "Can't see, can't be," and it applies to female leadership. It applies to Special Olympics athletes and people with any sort of disabilities. If they can't see themselves represented, you know, in the media or around the boardroom, then how can they be it, you know? So it's, again, it's not only female bias, but it does very much feed into it, you know. And as well as Virginia and Heather both touched on, how you're brought up, you know. If everybody on this call would think at the moment, if you are into sport, you probably watch male sport. You probably go to a male football match or GAA match. So if you do have children, I would urge you to maybe switch on a female team, like a match coming up. Seek that out, expose your young boys to female abilities as well across the sporting sector. Show them that, you know, we are equal and that we have a lot of ability as well. So that's one challenge that I'm going to ask everybody to do today, because again, even all those young boys growing up, they need that education, open up the conversation and expose them to, as we were talking about, an amazing talent pool as well.
Thank you, Pamela. I've got a question that naturally kind of follows, and maybe we'll go into the kind of general Q&A from our members now. You touched on in terms of giving more visibility and sight to, you know, our kids today to watch female sport. Would you like to see more, I suppose, media commitment and investment by the media groups to give that exposure to the female sports and obviously Special Olympic athletes as well?
Yeah, look, that's a great question, and that's my daily goal, you know, is to try and achieve that on behalf of the athletes. Yes, look, unfortunately from a media perspective, there's a lot of practical you know, barriers there, and just, you know, journalists now are so stretched, media budgets are cut and stuff like that. So yeah, and then obviously, like, they're always looking for the shiniest story too. So yeah, look, we're knocking on their doors. We do have really good relationships with them, and I suppose with the past 2 years, sporting activity, particularly for Special Olympics, has been marred by COVID and the vulnerability of our athletes as well. They're in a particular medical vulnerability. So that is all changing, and this year we have a really busy year planned of advancement events and working towards World Games and stuff like that. So we have more things to talk about and to chat with them. But yeah, in general, I think just putting it on the media's agenda again about inclusivity across the board will be amazing to see more of that come to light. Yeah.
Okay, and we've got a question here that called out especially for you, Fiona. Where a female finds themselves in a position where they're repeatedly blocked in an organization from moving forward in their career, what advice would you provide?
Yeah, no, that's a hard one. And I think there's probably a couple of things there. One is obviously to build some allies in the organization or through a network. So surround yourself with some like-minded people that can support you and through that. The second thing is probably to identify maybe a sponsor in the organization. So someone that's at a senior level, maybe not in your direct organization, but they can be your voice when you're not in the room, and you know, to seek them out, you know, to proactively seek them out and sit down and have a cup of coffee and get their advice as to what you might do. It may mean ultimately you move to a different organization where your talent will be nurtured, and obviously that can be a tricky call, but definitely surrounding yourself with like-minded people that can support you and give a different perspective on what might be happening, and identifying someone more senior that could act as your sponsor, because that also is seen as a huge initiative for people to move forward in their careers, where, you know, who are those people advocating when you're not in the room? Whoever you are, that's seen as one of the single biggest advantages.
Thank you, Fiona. I might go to Heather for further questions, if that's okay. In the context of what is the right or wrong culture, can you give examples of that, and maybe also outline how would you knock out the wrong culture that you see?
That's a very good question. And culture will be bespoke and unique to every single organization or entity. So it has to be defined as what is right or wrong for that particular company. And that said, there is a model, and through Richard Barrett's work, and there's the Values Academy, and there's many different models, but there is, based on industry standards, there is a scale that goes from 0 to 100, and 0 to 10 is a healthy functioning culture, 11 to 20, you know, and so it goes down the different grades to, you know, the one that I spoke of earlier was at 37%. And that was, you know what, the leadership team and the CEO really need to pay attention to this, because if you go into 40%, you're geared towards bankruptcy. And that's proven based on tens of thousands of studies done, hundreds of thousands of individuals, 96 countries, 60 languages. It's just global, this work. So that's a really good benchmark. And that's why I encourage to get a data point to help you get a sense. And then the other example, when I go back to the Swim Ontario, the sport body, they had a high functioning culture at 6%. So it was less than 10, very high functioning on the leadership team. And we did it with the board as well. So very high functioning. And yet that did not translate down, still does not translate down into the whole sport body across the province, tens of thousands of individuals and hundreds of clubs, where that's the next phase of development. Now that the board and the leadership are aligned on what are the important values for that particular organization, they can roll it out across. They had to get aligned first. So that's a broad answer, but there are, I think the most important thing is to get a data point and get what are the values that are important to you in that organization. And sorry, and I bring onto that in terms of creativity and innovation, you know, to go back to Virginia's point about economic drivers, Firms of Endearment is a great book for anyone who wants to see a 15-year, 2 longitudinal studies in terms of companies and organizations that outperform the S&P 500 year over year over year when they have a healthy workplace culture. And there's great case studies in there to look at as well.
Thank you, Heather. Another question, obviously we touched on already that diversity and inclusion isn't just one day a year, right? So what do each of you bring into your respective daily role? I might start with Fiona and just work around the group of panelists, but what do you bring each day? What questions do you ask yourself in the morning in terms of what can I do today to bring that agenda forward? Is there one thing that for our members that they can take away and apply in their day-to-day role? Anything that you'd recommend?
Yeah, I think one simple one, but yet very powerful. You know, what can I do today to support you to be at your best? You know, for each individual, that's quite different, and that might be just to sit there and listen to someone. It might be to support them, you know, with a different perspective. But even just to say to someone, how can I support you, can be a very powerful yet simple question.
Amla, anything you want to add?
Yeah, and I suppose what Heather was touching on is you know, to live it, like the, you know, if it's in your culture, I suppose, so it's looking and seeing what can you do in your daily roles to live that culture. So it can be, as we were saying, those little chats before or after a meeting, like, do you still conduct yourself and speak in the same way that you would when the cameras are on as such, you know? So it's just about looking like, I'm really ensuring that it's embedded in the fibers of how you act as a leader within your organization. Yeah, so pretty much trying to, as I said, look and live it, and what's applicable to you. And yes, don't leave it just to International Women's Day every year. It's great to see it grown year after year, and I commend the Compliance Institute for holding a session like this as well. But yeah, the challenge is for everybody to live and breathe it now for the rest of the year.
So I'll pass the question to Heather and then to Virginia, hopefully. In terms of that, is there anything you want to add in terms of that question you come to work with every day, or that you'd recommend to our membership?
I think I actually have, I don't have it handy, but I have designed a custom note card. So it's very much like a goal card, where it's every day identify, what am I going to do today to move my culture forward? Am I to have that courageous conversation, to model vulnerability as a leader? I messed up, I misspoke, I apologize for how I said that. To know that just start and try. You're going to make mistakes. I've been corrected by friends 25 years ago. I used the word mulatto. I was taught that word by my mother. I didn't know that's a racist term at the time. I'm so grateful that I was told that was inappropriate. And from that day forward, I have told anyone I have ever heard, no matter what position of authority they are in, that that's an inappropriate and hurtful word. So to model that for other people, and every single day have this on your radar.
I've got another question that's just come in. As somebody within middle management, how can they push that positive culture upstream? And maybe I'll go to Fiona, because I think, Fiona, you touched on bottom up, and actually, sorry, no, it was Heather. So Heather, maybe if you want to take it, how would you influence that from the middle management team to drive that culture in the organization?
Sure, that is such a great question. I'm a huge believer that you can lead from any part in the organization and lead by example. And so I would start with your team. I would also, you know, get your team, if you can get that working well and leading by example to other people, modeling the behaviors that you want to see, having the courage to speak up and say, I don't think this policy is right. An example that I'll use that just happened is a new a woman at a director level who has to do a job posting. Their company policy is that there's no salary posted. That doesn't fly anymore. So she refuses to post that job unless they post the salary on the job. At least that's in my circles here in Canada. It's the trend. You got to post your job, your salary. And so she's influencing her CEO, who's just always done things a certain way. And so challenge the systems, have the courage to do it. Now more than ever, I'm seeing, it just happened, but I know I have a lot of sport references. It's so much in the news these days. Bobsled Canada has demanded the resignation of a whole swath of leadership for toxic culture in the organization. So this is the staff and the athletes are saying no more, time's done. So it takes courage, and you'll be supported. You will find people that support you and champions.
Okay, we might take one more question that's just come in. Are people hiding their diversity to achieve rather than taking the slower approach by attempting to tackle the diversity agenda? And maybe Fiona, do you want to take that one?
Just what's the context? Is this individuals or companies, Dermot? Sorry, just to.
In individuals. So I think my
Yes.
interpretation of the question
Yes.
is,
Yes.
for example, if I wanted to apply for a role, and years ago I might have done this, I would have thought I was too young.
Yes.
So I would have hid that.
Yes.
So I think that's the angle they're coming from the question, or at least I think that's the way they're coming from.
Yeah, I think that is changing, and and hopefully organisations are definitely leaning and putting a lot more effort into encouraging that people are bringing their whole selves to work. So whether it's gender, whether it's sexuality, whether it's ethnicity, that actually being proud of who you are is a big part of who you are and how you perform. And again, the studies would show that where people are bringing their whole selves to work, that actually is a big part of enabling the career advancement. And I think you get to a certain point where you suddenly realize that you're proud of who you are, and you stop that hiding and actually role modeling that. The point that Heather was saying earlier, when you have examples of people that proudly show who they are. There was a wonderful post recently I saw on LinkedIn from a guy that graduated from DCU and shared a very turbulent family background, the first person that had been able to go to college, and he just proudly, in a very public way, wrote about his background and how he was and I think that is celebrated more and more, and people definitely want to see what the story is behind the person, but that definitely adds to the richness in the workplace. And I think as well, from a trust point of view and vulnerability, people gravitate towards that a little bit more. Like, there's so much perfection put out there, and I think when people hear the genuineness of something, it definitely creates that lovely trust and engagement, and people just, there's natural curiosity, and people want to see that person get ahead then as well.
Yeah. I think, look, we're coming up close to time, so I'm conscious I want to kind of close on a particular note. So I suppose final comments, I guess, embracing diversity and forming welcoming, inclusive cultures is I think we can all agree, it's not just the right thing to do, it makes business sense. I, as part of the Compliance Institute and as president, I want to thank you all. I think the insights you've given today have been immensely valuable from our membership base and also for myself. And I think really the kind of key takeaway I have is we need positive advocates within our business. Everybody has a responsibility to speak up. And where you see inappropriate treatment or exclusion, it is our responsibility to be an ally. It is responsibility to stand up and change that behavior and culture within the organization. I want to finish today with a quote from the official theme of International Women's Day. Imagine a gender equal world, a world free of bias, stereotypes, and discrimination. A world that is diverse, equitable, and inclusive. A world where difference is valued and celebrated. Together, we can all forge women's equality. And collectively, most importantly, we can all break the bias. So I just want to thank everybody for joining us today, and a huge thank you out to our panelists and also the executive team for organising the event. I really appreciate it. I think it's been very beneficial. So thank you all, and look forward to engaging with you again in the future.
Thank you very much. It was a pleasure.
Thank you, Dermot. Lovely to meet
Thank
everyone.
you.
Take care.
Yeah.
Lovely to meet everyone.
Brilliant. Thank you.